Excellent, interesting.
Right, good evening everybody. Welcome to the Society of Authors. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Daniel Blythe, one of the newest members of the committee. It's my great pleasure to introduce Jonathan Emmett, who is going to be talking to us tonight. Jonathan, you will know of from his books. He's also a winner of the Red House Children's Book Award, the Sheffield Book Award, and he's also someone who's been an early adopter of the internet. I was very impressed to hear that his website has actually been up and running since the last century, as he said. But I think we could also say since the last millennium. I think you're right. So Jonathan is going to be doing lots of very high-tech stuff for us. I think lots of us have done the traditional school visit where we turn up and often not to break anything, and I'll give them the red lanyard of doom for being doing our actual presentation on the day. But I hope that Jonathan's talk is going to give us a whole new dimension about how to present ourselves virtually through Skype. I should also mention that as well as all the people who are here in the room, we have people who are here virtually too, who are on webcam and audio. So we'll be joining in with some of the questions. So we have, during the question and answer session, which we will have after Jonathan's talk, Poppy will be doing questions from the people who are here as a virtual presence. So Jonathan will be talking and presenting, and then we'll have some questions afterwards. So if you have a question, please make sure that you hang on to it, and we'll have them all together at the end. So please, will you give a very warm welcome to tonight's speaker, Jonathan Emmett.
Thank you for coming out on what is a gorgeous evening outside and sitting in a dark room with me. But just to get a sense of sort of level of what I'm talking to, can you tell me, can you stick your hand up if you've ever Skyped with schools or used FaceTime with schools to get an idea of how many you?
Once.
Okay, so and stick your hand up if you've never Skyped or FaceTimed at all, so you're a complete novice. Okay, so that's good. I will keep it at novice level, and nobody can feel that patronised. That's good. So actually, if you could just, just give us, it'll help us see the screen. Okay. So yeah, my name is Jonathan Emmett, and oops, check this is working. There we go. I've been Skyping the schools now for about 5 years. I got drawn into it by some of my American readers, and I discovered very quickly that Skyping has been quite an established way for authors to interact with schools in America for quite some time. It was already well established 5 years ago. And a school in the States asked if I'd Skype with them, and I did it, and I found it actually found it quite exciting. It's kind of, you know, for me, Skype and things like FaceTime are the sort of things that were on science fiction shows when I was a kid. So seeing a school in the States, you know, and talking to them was quite an exciting experience for me. And I thought the novelty would wear off. But 5 years later, I'm still doing it. I still find it, you know, an appealing way to engage with kids. I'm going to bring, I've Skyped with 139, it's 111 different schools, and 139 different sessions. So the difference between those two numbers is because there's now schools that I Skype with on an annual basis. Personally, I only do quick 20-minute Skypes. And in the States, there's kind of a two-tier system where authors either do quick 20-minute Skypes for free, or they do longer Skypes for a fee. And so the sites that sort of directory sites in the States, you know, people tend to fall into those two categories, with most people kind of offering both. I only do the short ones, and because I'm doing them for free, I have a limit on schools that I'll only Skype with them once a year. But now there are several schools that I Skype with on an annual basis, so it's kind of built up a relationship with that particular school. To try and give you an idea of why I find it a sort of rewarding and engaging experience, I've picked out a couple of my favourite schools and the way that they've responded to a Skype session. So this is one school in Pennsylvania, and the way that my Skype sessions tend to work is that I read a book for 10 minutes. They tell me which book they've been reading or which book they'd like to hear. And then typically, for the other 10 minutes, I will do a Q&A with the class. But if the school's got something that they want to do in that 10 minutes that doesn't involve any preparation from me, then they can do that as well. So some schools have done a little play for me. Some schools have just, the kids have just come up and they've told me about their favourite book and why they like it. With this school in Pennsylvania, they wanted me to read Ruby in Her Own Time. And when I turned on the Skype, when I connected up to them, I discovered that they'd all made these little Ruby hats. So Ruby is a story about a little duckling. And not only that, but when it came to the Q&A, they said, well, first of all, we want to tell you what we thought about the book. And each thing that they came and told me about, they made a piece of artwork. So this is a page with words that describe Ruby, so they analyse the language. Other ones, I was surprised when, and they showed me the favourite bits of the book. And then each question that they'd asked, they'd illustrated it. And this was for a 20-minute Skype session. I often don't get that much engagement when I go in person to the school. So, you know, I couldn't help being impressed by this. Here's another school that I had a really good experience with. This is a school in New York State. And ahead of my visit, as with a real session, you always try to encourage teachers to introduce kids to your books so they're not sort of coming to it cold. And this particular teacher, Laurie, had read 15 of my books with the class before the visit, and then they'd had a vote on which was their favourite book. And the book that came out top was this one, called Cowan's Incredible Construction Kit, which is one of those books that lots of kids like, but didn't really sell that well, so it's no longer in print. And I told them at the end of the session, when they told me this was their favourite book, and kids came up to tell me why they liked it, which is their favourite pages, that I was quite surprised to see this book win the poll, because it wasn't available in America. And Laurie had imported some of my books, English editions of my books, to include in the sort of 15 that she read. And so, you know, it's just quite nice for me to think that there are kids in the States that are reading this book and I didn't even know about. Session finished, didn't really think much more about it. But then I got an email from Laurie about 5 months later to say that they carried on, you know, the session had gone really well, and that they had set up the official US Cowan's Incredible Construction Kit fan site as a class project. And on their fan site, which is still online, you know, there were lots of pictures that the kids have drawn from my books, which is something that, you know, schools quite often do. But the thing I really love about it was that she got the kids to write letters to American publishers. They didn't send them what, but so this was a dear publisher, please publish Cowan's Incredible Construction Kit. And we love that. And we love that book. So what are you going to do? And it was just a series of very short letters saying, why on earth aren't you publishing this book? It didn't get published, but it was a lovely kind of follow-up. So those are kind of two of my favourite things. As I say, sometimes I've done little plays in my books and stuff like that. It's been a good experience for me. But I still do real visits as well. And I'm not going to try and pretend that, you know, Skyping is a substitute for doing real visits. There are, you know, things that you can do on a real visit, and that sort of being in the room, interaction, you know, is something you can't entirely replace electronically. But there are also things that you can do on a Skype visit, which is something which I'm going to show you today, that help to kind of close that gap. And there's one or two areas where I think Skype is just one or two very limited areas, perhaps even better than a real visit in some very limited areas. But generally speaking, I'm not presenting it as a substitute. I'm really presenting it as something that you can supplement your real visits with. So I'm going to talk quite quickly about setting up. And when we were advertising this session, we called it Skyping with FaceTime with schools. And I said that I was going to talk a little bit about setting up Skype and FaceTime accounts. As it is, I've got so much material, I'm going to struggle to fit it into the hour. So I've decided I'm not going to cover setting up FaceTime at all. If any of you don't know FaceTime, it's the Apple sort of version of Skype that's available on Mac computers and iPads and iPods. It's much, much easier to set up than Skype, but it doesn't do everything that Skype does. For instance, you can't have a three-way conference. So you can't Skype with two schools at once, so you can't have, you know, two authors talking to one school. You also can't present PowerPoint presentations or keynote presentations like this one. So on the handout sheet, what I've done is I've put in a link to setting up FaceTime. The other reason why I'm going to focus on Skype is because Skype is cross-platform. You can use it on practically anything, an Android phone, an Apple phone, Windows or a Mac machine. So most schools will be able to Skype with you. Only those with Apple Kit will be able to FaceTime you. But most of the things I'm going to tell you about how you present yourself on the screen are equally applicable to how you might do it in FaceTime as well. And I have, on a couple of occasions, I've FaceTimed with the school instead of Skype with the school because it's just quicker to set it up that way. Even with Skype, I realised that if I was going to talk you through setting it up, there was a myriad of options. And so I'm just going to do a very quick overview. Again, on the handouts, there's a link to the Skype page where it sort of talks you through setting up each account. And if you go to that page, it's not very conspicuous, but you'll notice if you go to either the Mac or the Windows page, in the top corner of the screen is a pull-down menu that will allow you to select whatever operating system or device that you're using at the time. So just flagging that up now. I'm just going to talk you through the basic principles of setting up the account, just to flag up a few things that are worth flagging up on whatever platform that you're on. If you go to Skype.com, one of the good things about it is that it will generally recognize what operating system you're on. So if you're on a version of Windows, it will recognize what version of Windows you're on. If you click download the app, it will find the right version. You won't have to go through a long list, you won't have to do lots of difficult questions. It will just recognize whatever you're browsing in and download the right version for you. Once you've downloaded it, or I think these days you can do it within the browser as well, you need to create a Skype account with a name, which can be your own name, you need an email address, you need a Skype name or a username. This is very important, and a password. This is very important because this is the one bit of your Skype account that makes it unique. Okay, so you can have multiple accounts with the same name and email address, but with different Skype names. You can switch between, and same password. If you wanted, the Skype name is the thing. It's like it's equivalent of your phone number. Okay, so there's only one, and then it should always be able to contact you on that particular Skype name or that particular account, on that particular Skype name. A lot of people, when they set up a Skype account, don't bother to fill out all the details because they just want to get up and start using it. Do put a photo of yourself, because you'll realise when you start using Skype, there are so many people on it. A lot of them have the same name as you. Anything you can do, like a photo of yourself, filling in the country and location information, is going to make it easy for schools to find you if you're trying to hook up with them. And the last thing I recommend is that if you are already using Skype, and there's a few people who were, set up a separate account for schools. And the reason for that is I have a Skype account that I use for sort of personal use. When I'm using it for personal use, I've got the app open for personal use. I don't really want the school calling me, to ask about next week's Skype visit, or just school-related business, or like it's business-related business. So if you have two Skype accounts, it means that you can sort of separate out. You can have the app open all the while in case your auntie in New Zealand rings or whatever, but there's no risk of a school ringing you unless you log out of one and then log into the other. So it's worth setting up two separate Skype accounts if you think you're going to start using it on a personal basis. But the other advantage is when you start, if you Skype with the same schools regularly, or if you Skype with the same friends regularly, you haven't got this massive long address book that's both business and personal contacts, and it makes it easy to sort of find who you're looking for. One big tip, and this has saved me so much, I think it's taken up so much time when I first started Skyping, is you can just look somebody up on Skype and call them straight away, but you can also do what's called sending a contact request, and this is a way of confirming that you contacted the right person and that they want to let you Skype with them in advance of the actual call, or in advance of your first call. And I'm going to quickly sort of take you through that as to how you do that. I always do this in advance of the session, because even if quite often the school will say, I don't have what's called a Skype name, a unique bit, I just use my email address, and give me their email address. I go to Skype, and I'll write things, I'll show you in a minute, and there are 5 accounts on the email address because they've set up multiple accounts every time they've got a new machine or something like that, and they haven't realised how many different accounts they've got. So it's finding out which one of those 5 accounts is the right one to call on the day, and you can do that by sending a contact request and narrowing it down to one Skype username. So do it in advance of the session. If the school asks you to Skype them, say, can you tell me your username? Okay. And then when you've got that information, you open up Skype and it will make it different according to your operating platform, but somewhere there will be a little address book icon like that. And when you click on that, you can open up an address book page like this. This is quite a short page because I'm using lists, which I'll explain to you later. On the address book page, there will be a little person with a plus icon up there, which is how you add a contact to your address book. I don't know why I'm pointing to it. There you go. How you add a contact to your address book. So you click on that, and it brings up the add contact page. And this kind of illustrates the point. I've typed in Jonathan Emmett. There are 33 Jonathan Emmets on Skype. The ones at the top of this list have been good enough. Well, this one has got a photo in. These ones have got location information. If you scroll down to that bottom of this, I don't know if this is why at the bottom of the list, they haven't got location information and they haven't got a photograph. So, you know, just a name is not enough. And as I say, sometimes you type in an email address, the school will swear blind they don't have a Skype name. You already use an email address, you type in an email address, happened to me about a month ago, and there are 5 accounts registered to that email address. So underneath each of these Jonathan Emmets, there is a Skype name or a username that has no spaces in it. So it's got dots or numbers. And that's the unique name for each account. That's what you need to get off the school. What I recommend is you get off the school in advance. That bit there. If you type that into the box, so I've made up the imaginative name, Jane Teacher 1975, you'll only get 1 account. And you'll know that that is hopefully the right account. Sometimes schools give you an old Skype name, but once you've got that, you can press. Sorry, just to show you what the Skype name is. You can press the little add person button on the address book, and a window like this will open up, and you can type in a message. And so I usually try and type in something that makes it clear that it's about a school session. So please add me as a contact for my Skype session with your school. The good thing about having a separate account for schools is that message is remembered from the last time you use it, and it's just put in as default next time you click add contact. So it'll just, if you write a longish message, it'll just fill it out for you every time. Then you click send to send it off, and then before we leave this page, I'm going to show you a couple of the things that I usually do when I'm initially making contact with the school. So I click on the little icon of the person I just sent the contact request to, which opens up their details page. You can see Jane Teaches your teacher because she's holding an apple. It's not going to have a blackboard. When was the last time you saw a blackboard in school? But, anyway, that's Jane Teacher's contact page. And you'll see up here, I'm so glad I highlighted these because I can't reach them. You'll see up there that it says pending contact request, which basically means the request has been sent, but they've not confirmed that they want to exchange contact details with you. So at the moment, there's not much information here. If they accept the contact request, we get a load of things like their phone number, possibly their email, and that won't just allow you to Skype them easily. It will share all the contact details at the moment. Once you've sent the contact request, one of the things you can do, which you can't do if you haven't sent a contact request, is you can edit their name in your address book. So what I usually do is, if I know I'm going to be Skyping that school on a certain date, I type in the date at the beginning of the name. So it's a very sort of quick reference when I get back to the main address book pages, because you'll see. And the other thing I do is there's a little function down here that says add to list. And if you click on that, it will give you the option, if you click on the bottom, to create a new list or add a name to a previous list. These are just ways that the address book is organized. Again, you'll see in a minute. So I have a list for upcoming visits, previous visits, because quite often I will Skype again with a previous school, and even next visit, so I can find it really, really quickly. So I would click upcoming visit for this because I know that I'm going to be Skyping with Jane Teacher on June the 21st. And then I click, if I go back to the main address book page, You'll see that her name's been added on the bottom. This is, I've clicked the upcoming visits tab at the top, so I'm seeing her on that list, and I'm not seeing this great big long list of all the other people I've Skyped with in the past. It's just the ones that are coming up for a visit. It's slightly out of date now. And again, it says pending contact request to show that it's not quite been accepted. At some point between now and the visit, that should change to either offline, online, or away, but it will stop saying pending contact request. And that means you know that they've read it, you've got the right account, and they've accepted your contact request. So it means when you ring up on the day, they should be there, basically. By the time the day comes and the right time comes, that should have changed to online, and you know that they're ready and waiting and ready to go. When it actually comes to the time of the visit, if you're still using this address book page, you just move your cursor over this little online thing, and you get these three icons. That's a message icon, an audio call-in icon, and a camera video call icon. And that's the one that we're going to be doing. So you click on the video call, the screen opens up like this, and all being well, after ringing for a bit, it'll open up like that. This is actually a visit I did yesterday, to give you an idea of kind of like standard picture quality. Having said which, this is a school in New Mexico, which is just under 5,000 miles away. And that is one of the extraordinary things, is that you because of modern technology, you can speak to someone on the other side of the planet. And like I say, if Texas is only a little bit nearer than New Mexico, the best picture quality I get from schools is from schools in Texas, because they have really good local broadband connections. I have Skyped with schools in Nottingham, where I live, and it's had terrible picture quality just because of our local broadband connection. So that's one of the kind of anomalies of Skyping. But that was from yesterday's visit. I did ask for their permission. I should say, if you're going to take a picture of kids, American schools are a lot more relaxed about it than UK schools, but ask first. So what often happens is they say, can we take a picture of you? Actually, yesterday I said, well, would you mind if I took them back and use? I can show it to some authors tomorrow. So that's how it looks on the screen. We'll be coming back to this a little bit later. I'm going to try and do a Skype to show you a couple of things about presentations, but that's the kind of rudiments of it. Now, I should just say at the end, let me just go back. You end the call by clicking on this red button on the end with the camera icon. All of this is on the Skype website, whichever operating system that you're using, about how to start and end a call, but just quickly to take you through it and flag a few things as we go. So that takes you back to a page like this, and going out to Skype, about just how you prepare for a visit. Most of the stuff is anything you need to do the first time, you know to do it, or you need things set up this way. How you prepare for a visit, and how you kind of present yourself on the visit. First thing I'm going to start with is camera angle. Because this is I've noticed this not so much from watching other authors Skyping, but I've seen other authors do YouTube videos where they're talking to the camera. And this applies every bit as much as, if you're doing a sort of two-camera piece on your laptop in a YouTube video. But I'm flagging it up to the Skype today. So if before you Skype, you want to see what you look like in your room, this is a useful way of doing it. If you're on something like an iPad, you can just put it in selfie mode, so you're using the camera on the front, and you can sort of see, what you're going to look like that. Similarly, if you're, on a phone, same way. If you're on a Mac, there's an app called Photo Booth, which just takes a photograph from the camera on the front of your laptop or on the front of your Mac, and imagines it for the version in Windows. But if you haven't got anything like that on Windows, or you're not sure where to find it, within the Skype app itself, if you go to the preferences, so you go to Skype menu, pull down to preferences, and then within preferences, there should be an audio video tab. And if you click on that, you get a page that gives you a little preview. So you can see ahead of doing your call how you will appear to the school that you're Skyping with. Okay, and I'm going to talk quite a bit about how you set up your camera, because I think this is one of the things that a lot of people kind of fall down on the Skype sessions. So this is how I have my setup at home. So I have quite a big iMac, and the camera is right at the top of the screen, And it's built-in camera, it's at head height when I'm sitting down, and it's shooting at me with a straight camera angle, and it gives me an image like this. And one of the good things about this image is that I've got my office wall as a backdrop behind me. When I first started Skyping, I always had pictures on that wall, but I had a really fantastic robot poster by Johnny Duddle, a book he's called The King of Space, and the cover came off and unfolded to make this amazing poster. And after a while, I thought, because kids were asking me questions about the poster, and I thought, that's not my poster. And so I took down everything was on that wall that wasn't to do with my books, and I started putting up posters that were to do with Steve Scott's inspiration that certainly there. And this is actually from a book trailer that I made. And because I know that kids are going to ask me about what's behind me on the wall. And so, treat it like a set. So think about what's behind you and dress the room that you're in like a set. That's the first thing. So this is using an iMac which just already has the camera mounted at head height. In fact, you're going to be Skyping using a laptop. Okay, so this is a laptop on the same desk. And I'm guessing like me, you would just have it like here. The thing about a laptop is, if it's going to be pointing at you, the built-in camera is going to be at chest height, as it is here. And if you're, depending on where you're sitting, it's probably going to be angled up at you at about 45 degrees. So the picture that you will get will look more like this, okay? And unless you are one of these people who thinks that the underside of your chin is your best side. I mean, what's even worse is as you tilt down, you get this lovely roll of fat there for the kids to see. Or unless you're one of those people who lives somewhere like the Sistine Chapel and you really want to show off your ceiling, then generally speaking, a camera angle like this is going to be a lot more favourable and entertaining for the kids than a camera angle like that. So what I suggest you do, if you have a laptop, two very simple options. You can spend 30 quid on a laptop stand, or you can do what I did for the purposes of this shot here. Just stick it on a stool. I've got this for later on. A wine box, if you happen to have one, but get it up to the height where you're using. I would recommend using a wine box as rickety as this one, but put it on something stable. Get it up so that when you are Skyping, it's at head height and it's looking at you horizontally. I've just pressed the key there by accident. So yeah, get it up to the right height. It's only a temporary thing. You probably won't be wanting to type on it, but it'll just give the kids a much better view to look at. And then the other thing I was going to say is when it is at the right height, and this is already true. This is equally true with my iMac screen because it tilts. Make sure that you're in frame. It drives me mad when I'm FaceTiming with my son that I always like talking to him now. I can just about see his eyes, and the rest of his head is missing. So angle it so that you're nicely within frame. Another thing is actually think about how close you sit to the screen, because if you have got an interesting office or you want kids to see behind you, you sit a little bit further back from the screen, they'll see more of the setting. Okay, if you haven't got it, if you want them just to see you, then sit close to the screen. But think about that sort of thing as well. Another big thing, and again, I really picked this up from looking at authors' YouTube videos more than Skype's, is lighting. Okay, so this is a very kind of exaggerated example, but think about whether your face is going to be literally in a good light, or whether you've got lots of highlight behind you. The camera will naturally adjust exposure and to a sort of average setting. So ideally you want some light on your face, so that's the main thing that the kids will be looking at. If you're Skyping in the daytime, and you have a desk next to a window, that's the kind of ideal. I can't have a desk next to a window because my window serves it doesn't work in my office, but a desk next to a window, the daylight is brilliant for daytime Skyping. So when I'm FaceTiming with my son, my whole family doing it, we quite often sit by the window, and we're all nicely lit, you can see us all. It doesn't work if you're south-facing and you're squinting into glare in the sun. But if you've got if you've got a north-facing window, or it's not a particularly sunny day, it's a nice overcast day, that will usually give you as good a lighting as you can get. So if you've got a laptop and you can go and sit by a window for a Skype session, that might be an option. Be aware that your computer screen is a light source. Again, I picked this up from an author's video, and it was a video for a historical romantic novel. Initially, I thought, is she going for that red glow on her face? You know, it's like a deliberate, is it going to be spooky? And it's, no, it's not spooky, she's got a bright red desktop. So this is, although, you know, I'm hamming it up for that, there's no sort of photoshopping on that. That's a green desktop. And be aware that the screen itself is a light source. Good thing as well as a bad thing. So if you haven't got any local light sources that you can use, you can set your screen to a neutral color. That one's just completely bright white, and use the screen to light your face. It's probably more effective if you've got a bigger screen rather than but it will work with a laptop screen as well. I don't do that, and the reason why I don't do that, for some reason I couldn't get it to show on that. When I took that screenshot, it's because I wear glasses and I get little white lights in my eyes, and I like the kids to be able to see my eyes. So the solution that I use is that I have a little desk lamp off to one side, and it just shines in from the side of my face. I've usually got daylight coming in from the other side, so I've got a nice even lighting on my face. But using the screen as a light is an option, and if you're going to do that, make sure that it's a good light, a light that you want to be seeing in rather than some ghastly. Unless you're doing scary reading, of course. You're doing something a green light or even a flickering one might be more appropriate, but be aware that it's a light source. Still sticking with before you Skype, I'm not getting to the call yet. A couple more things that I routinely do. So the camera's right at the top of my iMac. I can't remember names to save my life. Usually first thing in the morning, because quite often I don't prepare for Skype until 5 to 10 minutes before I start, I write out a piece of paper with the school's name, the school's location, and the teacher's name, and I stick it up, right up, you can do it with a post-it note, right next to the camera. Just, first of all, one of the reasons why I asked for the teacher's name, I'll pick up on this later on, is because when you're talking to a teacher, when the teacher initially contacts you, I quite often say, it's Jane Smith, I'd like to arrange a Skype session. When it comes to the session, you suddenly realise you don't know whether to call her Miss Smith, Ms. Smith, or Mrs. Smith, and it's not really the time to ask. So, again, when I'm arranging the visit, I have a standard form, and it's one of the things that I say, please give me your name and your title so I know what to call you in front of the kids. And then I write that on this piece of paper. And the reason why it's stuck up there is because when I realised, and I started Skype, the name of the school and the name of the teacher is completely gone out of my head, I can just look slightly above the camera to see it. And I don't have to kind of look away and say, hello everybody out, and kind of, or reach to one side. They don't know that I've forgotten who they are. And I can just read it because it's right next to the camera, it doesn't look like I'm looking away from the screen. A similar point, which I'll pick up on later, is that I also, even when you've got a nice big screen like this, the Skype window for the Skype app, when I open it, I keep it small and close to the camera. You can probably guess why it is, because I've just hinted on it. But don't open it full screen. So big temptation, because a nice big picture of the kids. I don't do that. I'll pick up on that a bit more later. If you're going to be sharing a presentation, such as PowerPoint or Keynote, or you're going to be showing some image electronically, or you're not holding it up to the screen, but you want to show me something you've got on your computer, open up the windows that you're going to be, open up the applications and a window with whatever you want to show them in it. I'll be showing you how you can share things later on, but do it before you start the session so you're not reaching about the files, with which put the session going. The other thing I do, and this is something that just sits there all the while, it's not that I sit down and think about it before the session, is I have a box of books next to my computer that is my school Skype session frequently asked questions books, because as you probably know from your own school visits, you do get asked the same questions again and again and again. And one of the good things about Skyping is you can have all of your books with you. When I first started going around schools and I had like 6 books, I used to take all of my books with me anyway. These days, when I've got 60, I'm not going to cart that lot around schools. But when you're Skyping, you can show anybody any of your books, but there are certain books that do keep cropping up in my case. So this is what's in my Skype school box. So I obviously have the session book, which is the book that I'm going to be using in the Skype session. Kids always ask me what my favourite book is, so I show them the Santa Trap, which is the favourite book of mine that I've written. Kids ask me what my first book is. Childhood favourite, that often comes up, because usually a child will say, what's your favourite book? And I will say, and do you mean what's my favourite book that I've written, or a favourite book that somebody else has written? And they usually say, oh, the favourite book you've written. And the next child says, what's the favourite book somebody else has written? So I have that. Kids quite often ask me, most of my books are fiction. Kids quite often ask me, do you like non-fiction? Because I'm interested in fiction. And I do. So I have an example, usually the most recent example of my non-fiction to show them. And then the other question I get asked a lot is, how many books have you written? And again, this is an opportunity to show somebody one of your books. So I have my latest book, and if I'm Skyping in an American school, I make sure that I have the latest book with the American cover. So instead of just, it's a classic case of show, don't tell. Instead of just saying, I've written 16, here's an opportunity to show one of the books on screen. And quite often, particularly if you start in school the following year, then the next year they say, can we have that book that you showed in the last session? Another really key thing to do, turn off the phone. If you've got a landline and mobile phone. Also, if you have any apps, like email applications that have a notification sound. I only have email now. I don't Twitter and Facebook. I don't have them interrupt me anymore. But my email makes a ding when an email comes in, and so I usually quit my email app. In the case of a landline, I actually have a physical. Although we have cordless phones in the house, like most people actually do have. It's one room in the house. I have a physical landline that I can take off the wall and literally take it off the hook, so I know the landline is not going to ring. But make sure that you're not going to get interrupted. You could go to the point of putting a note on the front door saying, passes around the back. I think twice I've had times to the door to the mail or the postman. But I think there's some things that schools upset that you can't eliminate. Finally, check your appearance. So I had a conversation about it, and Nick and I have been party to this on Facebook a few weeks ago about Skyping, and one of the authors that was talking about said, well, if I was Skyping, I'd have to think about how I would dress, and I would, prepare myself. I would dress for the Skyping. I'm afraid I don't do that. I just literally, I'm reasonably well dressed during the day in the house, and that tends to be what I will be wearing for the Skype session. But I still check my appearance before I go on Skype to make sure I haven't got toothpaste, or my hair doesn't look sticking up at a ridiculous angle. So do just have it, even just a quick look in the mirror. Just check your appearance before you actually press that button to call. With me, I always call them so that I'm in control of the time. So that's something that I usually mention my email, so I will call you. Okay, so we're now finally at the point where we're ready to start the session. I've got to sit and watch it because my mouth is drying out in the speak. So I called through to the school, and one of the things that I do when I send the email back when the schools ask me if I Skype with them, I say yes, and they've given me a date because I show you I have a booking table so you can see when I'm available. One of the things that I write back to them is, please read the Skype requirements on my web page. And the only one of those requirements that I flag up in the email, because if I wrote one up, I didn't want to read them all, was please try to make sure that the camera is next to the screen that the kids will be looking at. And still, even though I say that in the email, every now and again I will open up Skype, and this is what I see. And I don't know if it's that I'm an architect. I used to be an architect, and I think I'm going to be interested in a ceiling tile system or something like that. But they've got the screen over here, and they've got the laptop over here, and the teacher's been typing away on it, looking at it, and the camera's pointed straight at the ceiling. Sometimes it's not pointing straight at the ceiling, it's pointing at the sides of the kids' heads. And it seems a bit kind of curmudgeonly because the kids are excited and they can see you on the screen. But one of the things that I always insist on, if I can't see the kids and they're not looking towards it in the beginning of the session, is that the school fixes that and they move the camera so that it's next to the screen. And the reason for that is it's almost impossible to build up a rapport via Skype in the same way that I can build a rapport with you now, unless you can make eye contact with the kids. And you can see if you say something funny, you can see if they're laughing, or you can see if they're getting bored. So I'm really particular about that. Even though sometimes it seems like it's a bit of a faff and it's holding up the session, I always ask them to do it. Another absolute key thing, and this comes back to this thing about eye contact and rapport, is trying to keep your eyes on the camera or close to it. So when you've got the screen with all these kids waving at you, it's a big temptation to look at them. But this is what you look like on the screen when you're doing that. Whereas when you look at the camera, it's a tiny difference, but it looks like you are looking at them. Okay, and this is why when I showed you the initial setup, I have a small Skype window, because it's still good enough for me to see everything that's going on, but it means that most of the time, I am looking at them because I do want to see what they're up to. My eyes don't, I'm not looking somewhere down there, my eyes don't stray away from them. So they feel that I am engaging with them. So that's something that I've learned. Apple have, patented a system where the camera is actually in the screen. So at some point, that tip may be redundant, but right now it's certainly not. The other thing you have to teach yourself to do in Skyping is not to shout. And there's a couple of reasons why you might be doing that. One is if you've got the volume down on your laptop and you can't hear what the kids are saying, there's a kind of natural subliminal response to shout back because you assume they've got the same sort of a problem. If they can't hear it, they can turn their volume up. If you turn your volume up, that will stop you having that kind of subliminal feedback loop where you're compensating by shouting. The other time, so I've been doing this for a while, and I've learned that trick of not shouting, turning my volume up. The other time I got caught out by it was a few times I'd Skyped to a whole school hall full of kids, and I think I better shout because the kids at the back won't hear me. And actually, I'm on a PA system, and all of a sudden I've got a booming out over that. So you don't need to shout, and that's one of the nice things about Skype. You can whisper even when you talk about it later. I think where I think Skype might have a slight edge over my live presence is in reading some books. So you can whisper, you can be quite sort of slight difference between acting on stage and acting on screen. Another problem with Skype is you can't point to the kids. So if you are going to do a Q&A and you say, unless you're going to say, that boy in the second row back in the blue jumper, it's very difficult in a Q&A when the kids have got their hands up. So this is another reason why I always find out the teacher's name ahead of the session. Ask the teacher to moderate Q&As. And also generally, one of my preparations is I also teach you to make sure the kids have got some questions prepared, so that they've thought about it in advance. And then you say, Mrs. Smith, perhaps Mrs. Smith can ask, pick one of you have to ask a question. If in some cases you can't hear what the kids are saying because they haven't got a regular microphone around, you can ask them to come up to the mic, come right up to the front, and talk into the laptop or whatever they've got hooked up to speak to you. Okay, and then one of the last sort of basic things is this thing about making the most of being at home. So if somebody in a Q&A, I did a Q&A this week about a book called Pigs Might Fly, it's all about aeroplanes, and somebody asked me if I'd done a book about submarines. If I was at a school visit, I'd say, yes, I've done this book about submarines. I did it with this illustrator called Steve Cox. There's this amazing gatefold inside, and I just have to tell them about it. When I'm at home, I can literally, because all my books are in this bookcase, so I can literally get that book out of the bookcase, show them the gatefold. And they're more likely to take an interest in that book, get out of the library or buy it from the bookshop, if you do that. So always show, don't tell, if you can do. That means, going out of the room or any great distance. If you're Skyping on a laptop, or if you're Skyping on an iPad, I know that quite a few authors take people on a tour of their house. I don't do that because I Skype on an iPad. But only if your house is that tidy, mine certainly is. Basically I just tidy up the bit that's in camera. You can do that, and so it's another way that you can kind of give kids something by Skype you can't do when you're actually there in person. And it helps to close the gap between the live and the virtual visit. Right, now this is what I'm slightly worried about, because when I trialled this earlier, I had a problem sort of duplicating stuff on the screen. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about exploiting the camera. And rather than show you a presentation, I thought it would be more productive to actually show you me doing it live. Because this is one of the things that I think that Skype is very good at, is making the most of the fact that you are on camera. So I'm going to attempt to do this. I'm just going to quit this now. And I'm going to open up here. Photo Booth, which is basically just an app which puts the video. I'm not sure it's going to work. So it puts the video from the camera up on the screen. It allows you to record it or to photograph it. So I need to get onto the big screen. This is where I had problems last time. Come on. Okay, so already you can see that point about having the face well lit. I'm not sure this is going to work actually. This is not going to work. We did it in slightly different lighting conditions earlier. Actually, turn the light on. Yeah, let's see if that helps. Okay. That's a bit better. This is not ideal. I would not Skype with my face looking like that. It will allow me to kind of demonstrate this point. So one of the things that you can do, and this really applies mostly to when you're doing a regions, but actually I've started using it increasingly as part of my presentations as well. It's exploit the fact, let me just, it's coming up nicely brighter. Exploit the fact that you can make things get bigger and smaller on the screen in a way that you can't do in real life. So most of the things that I do that sort of make the kids laugh or just get quite a good reaction relate to doing that. They're usually when I'm doing a reading, but sometimes they're before reading. So for instance, this is a book that came out a few years ago, Clockwork Dragon, illustrated by Ellie Dolan. And I had been reading this in person in schools for about 6 months before I figured out that most kids do not know what clockwork is anymore. And I kind of, take it, they pick it up from reading the book, but certainly when you're reading it from cold, they don't know what clockwork is. So I started taking this little box into school, and in this little box are two little things. One is a little clockwork dragon, and I wind it up and I show to them, that it walks along and then it stops. And then the other thing is this little clockwork toy here, and I like this one because it's got a big key on the side, but all the workings are visible. It's got cogs and a big spring. Now, when I'm showing this in front of a class of 100 kids, I can kind of say it's got this little bit there, and it occurred to me, all I really need to do is show them on camera. But I never do that when I'm in schools because it's just too much of a faff to switch the camera. When you're Skyping, if I'm reading the Clockwork Dragon, and this is probably not going to be well lit enough to show you, but I can show it on the screen. I can hold it up like that. I don't know how well it's So you can show people things in amazing detail. So you can show them a key, and you can say, look, it's got these cogs here, show them around the side, and then you can show them the spring, which is unwound, and you can wind it up. So it allows you to play with scale in a way that you can't do it with. And usually, I'm not sure I'll trust it near this laptop, precariously thing on that. I'll show them that it sort of jumps around and stops. So if you've got objects or something you want to show them, you can use the camera to do that. The thing that I do, I'm going to cut down on the examples two for this now, is during a reading, I sort of play with that distance thing as well. So this is another book, The Santa Trap, and it's about this really beastly brat called Bradley Bartleby who decides that he's going to trap Santa and steal all of his presents. And when I'm reading this book, the first few pages, there's no dialogue. To a point about 3 pages in, and kids are used to seeing me on screen, and they're kind of settled into reading a book session, and it's just like teacher reading a book. And then I get to the first page where Bradley speaks, and he starts by being in a tantrum. And this is how I do it when I'm on screen. And it's not just going to work because you can see me at the same time. I was thinking of a lot of these things, but they'll see me. So try and look at the screen with this. So every Christmas morning, Bradley would discover that Santa had left him the same small gift. Socks! Another pair of stupid socks! Said Bradley. So I go in close like that, and that's that thing of the sudden emphasis, and they always have pounds left at that. And it's a bit like if you've ever Skyped with kids or if you've ever used FaceTime with kids, quite often at some point one kid will come up to the screen and sort of put his mouth up to it. Kids just think that's hilarious. I've used that. That was really the first time I kind of started doing that. I thought, well, actually, how can I play with that in other ways? And there are lots of ways to play with it. In this book, Princess and the Pig, there's 2 scenes very early on where people are holding up infants, babies, a baby pig. It's a farmer holding a baby pig, and over the page, it's kind of mirrored as a scene where the Queen is holding up her baby daughter. And so when I read that bit, and I usually use hardback because they stay open on their own, but I've got paperbacks of it. So when the Queen is holding her baby daughter, I would be doing like this on the screen. Like I'm used to the screen, let me throw that down. No, cropping my head now. I'll call it Priscilla, the Queen decided. Because that seemed like a good name for a pig. Now, I've not done it with this camera before. It doesn't work quite as well because I'm normally more in shot and I can't kind of get like that. But you can get that sense of perspective and make them feel like they're the ones being held. And so there are other examples. I do lots of books. I like reading about technology. And there's a couple of books that I've written where pushing a button is a pivotal point. So when I push a button, I always do it on the screen as well. There's another book I've written where this frog gets smothered in kisses, and I go to kiss the screen. Again, that gets the kids sort of howling up. There's lots of opportunities. Sometimes it doesn't work. There's a few things I've tried out. There's once a book where somebody falls out of a tree, and I thought I just push myself backwards in the chair and dwindle in perspective to the other side of the room. Kids didn't get that at all. So you need to experiment with it. And then more increasingly, even with things like Q&As, when kids have asked a good question, I think I read this to the screen, that's a really good question. And it just kind of makes you more animated, a presence on the screen. And it's something that you can use to your advantage, just use the fact that you've got camera and perspective. The other thing to think about when you're on screen is that you have a frame, and you don't normally have a frame, in real life. So you can bring things in and out of frame. And I've noticed it's something that I don't do, but I've read about authors that do this, that some authors do use glove puppets. So, here's Mr. Hand and here's Mrs. Hand. And you can change the glove puppets out of shot on your desk, row glove puppets, and you can bring them up on screen. I don't do that. But what I always do is if somebody says, what is your latest book or whatever, I always think about how I bring it into the frame. So I will always do this. If they say, what's your favourite book? I'll always bring it under the screen, and then I'll flick it up like that, and I'll say, it's this one. And usually it'll be better lit than that, not in mirror. But so think about framing. Think about how you can exploit it as well. That's something else that you can only really do when you're doing something virtually. Right. When Skype, I think I might go about 5 minutes at a time. Two more things I want to show you. One is how to share presentations on Skype. So how many of you for your visits would be using PowerPoint or Keynote or something like that? Probably most authors. And certainly I use them for all of my sessions. I even have just reading a picture book to the nursery group. Just because it's a picture book, I want them to see big pictures up on the screen. So I'm not going to, now we tried this earlier, I'm going to show you on this screen because I've discovered that if I try mirroring on there, it just messes up all of it. It doesn't work in the way that it would do if you were just Skyping naturally. So I'm going to show you on this screen, but I'm going to Skype to myself because that's the only way I found to do it right. So, yeah, I'm going to call myself. It says that I'm away, which is slightly worrying. Okay. Let's see what happens. Let's come up there. I can hear this beeping, it's not coming out yet. Right, and I'm going to break my own golden rule. Turn the sound, that's really good feedback. And face this towards you, but I'm not going to tip it down so I can see because it's going to fall off the desk. But this is just to give you a rough idea of what the school will be seeing. And then let's say, because I had a problem mirroring, actually this might still...
Do you want me to hold that at a different angle?
No, because you'll still be able to see it. It just means the camera's not is showing the ceiling, as you can see up on there. Actually, this is still... Yeah, it's mirroring there. Hold on a sec. Unfortunately, I found I couldn't get this to work with mirror displays once I started running Skype on this. So I'm going to show you one here. Because we've got the two microphones in the same room. And I'm just going to turn up the brightness. was trying to do then. Okay, so here's my Skype app, and this is going to be a little bit. Oh, should I show you something? I can't show you, but the problem is what you'll see on here. If I switch this onto mirroring, it will be so unlike what you would normally see. So we have to do it this way. This is Skype open at the moment, and interestingly, okay. I'm just trying something. Okay. There's a little preview image on the corner of the screen, and I think it's because I've got it hooked up to this projector. There should be a similar preview image of what's coming out of this camera on the corner of the screen. It's microscopically small because it's hooked up to this projector at the moment. But most importantly, is this little plus thing at the bottom of the screen. And this is what you use for sharing presentations. If you're doing a presentation, if you remember what I said at the beginning, have the windows open ready. So if you're doing PowerPoint, I've got a PowerPoint presentation here, open and ready to go. And go to this little plus icon. And when I click on that, a little menu opens up and it says Share Screen. And I'll click on that, and it gives me a couple of options, a pull-down menu at the top, share a window, or share your entire screen. I'm going to go to share your entire screen. Then on here, why is that showing something different? I've tried this, hang on a sec. Oh, because I'm not pressed start. Thank you. Okay, so now, here we go. Now you get to see everything that's on my screen. So that's a little hint. Don't leave anything on your desktop. You don't want to share with the kids. But once you've done that, if you go back to PowerPoint and start the presentation, it's set to fill the whole screen. So I can't remember oh. No, that's giving me the presenter view. This is it's because it's hooked up. It's because it's hooked up to a second monitor. I'm going to disconnect that. Hope I can reconnect it and show the end of the presentation. Okay. Now it's no longer hooked up to a second monitor. That's all right. Okay, the good news is, I thought this might not work. I've got a backup on on Keynote. That would be much better to show you that way, but actually do it. Don't try Skyping while you're hooked up to a projector. That's another lesson that I'm going to be telling you. Hopefully, okay, right. We'll go back to the presentation.
You want the lights down again?
Yes. Okay, so fortunately, I put this together. It's a kind of it's a shorter version, but it shows you basically the same things in case things went wrong. Okay, so have the window open for whatever presentation you want to show, and you can have anything. You can have a photograph. You can have a Photoshop page that you want to draw on if you're an illustrator. You can share with the kids. And your Skype window here, there's this little plus thing at the bottom. This is what I was showing you a moment ago. Go to share screen, click on it, and it will give you these two options. Now, for some reason, it wouldn't let me take screenshots, so I had to take photographs of this, which is why it looks a bit blurry. So you want to go to the okay, I've shown share a window option, or share entire screen option. If you go to share entire screen option for PowerPoint, whatever you're displaying on the screen will come up and fill most of their screen, but they'll still have the little preview window in the bottom. Oh, share, oh, looks like I've done share a window. Okay, in this case, I'm going to share a particular window, which is a Safari browser window that I'd set up a presentation in. And what I'm hoping, so basically what they will see is something very similar to this, but this window will be filled with whatever your presentation is. They'll have a little preview window showing how they look on camera, and they'll also have a little preview window showing them, showing your face and you talking about whatever the presentation is. The same button, so when you're finished with that, and you want to stop showing the screen, you obviously just go up to stop showing the screen. But the same button is also how you add people to the Skype. So if you click on that, you'll see that underneath the sharing screen thing is it says add people, and it'll just bring up your address book, and you can just click on names that you want to add to the Skype. So if you wanted to say to do a joint Skype with an illustrator, or you wanted to Skype with 2 schools at once, something that I've not done, you can do it that way. When you hit add, it will phone the person that you're not already talking to. You can do this once you started the Skype, and that will allow you, that if they pick up the phone, that will allow you to see both the original school and whoever you've added on a split screen, and it will be 50-50, exactly half one and half the other. You can add up to 25 people that way, but you need to have the bandwidth to do it. So you might find that once you go to bigger numbers, the picture quality and the sound quality starts to deteriorate. Shame I couldn't show you how to do that presentation. You can find stuff online on how to do it. This whole thing of trying to show it on a big screen, it doesn't work. I've just discovered it doesn't work. I did try it on alternate screens at home. Okay, one last thing I was going to say before I wind up is how to promote your Skype sessions. So if you're starting to Skype, how to let schools know about them. When I first started Skyping, it was predominantly a US thing, and there is still this great site in the US called the Skype and Author Network, where you can advertise your Skypes, whether you offer free or for a fee Skypes. They will let you set up your own page. So if you haven't got, you haven't got a website you can edit easily, they have a very easy to edit system where you can set up your own page, talk about your requirements and your availability. I've looked through this, I can't see anywhere where it says that you need to have a book published in the States. But if you've got books published in the States, then you're possibly more likely to get schools being interested. But I started getting schools very quickly from the States after I was listed on that site. But bear in mind, it's predominantly American site. Similarly, the other thing, again, if you want to engage with an American audience, Kate Messner is a bit of a Skype pioneer in the States, and she offers both free and paid visits. And she just doesn't for a limited period each year now. I always book out both sets, both free and paid visits. And she has this page where she started listing authors who Skype for free, and there are hundreds right now. And it's just a name. You click on it, and it takes you to the website of that person. That's all she's done for that stage. Since I signed up to those about 5 years ago, Skype in the classroom, Skype itself, have been a bit more organised about advertising not just authors who Skype, but anybody who Skypes. If you're a forest ranger or an astronaut and you're available for Skype visits, you can advertise on Skype in the classroom site for free, and again, they will let you advertise for both free and for fee visits. I actually find this site really difficult to use. So although I can find my kind of login page on it, I could not find my session page the other day, and that's happened to me a couple of times. I really don't like using it. I get very little schools coming to me from that route, but I'm just flagging it up as another international option. The first two were American, partly because of this lack of a UK option. About 3 years ago, I set up virtualauthors.co.uk. This is just a directory that is aimed at UK schools. There's no fee for being on it, but you do need to be a traditionally published author with at least one book that is currently in print. And it was initially I set it up on the same lines as Kate Messner's site, which was that it was only people who Skyped for free. But I gave a little bit of gave the opportunity for a little bit of information. But again, it's just a link to their page. So I don't organise the session for you. It just allows people to click on a link, and it takes them to a website where they can find how to organise a session with that particular author. As of this year, I now list authors who only charge a fee and don't offer free visits, but do both. So check that out. If you're interested in Skyping, this is the way that I'm trying to get schools to engage. In the last 2 or 3 years, I've had a lot more uptake from UK schools. So about 75% of them are still American schools. The other 25% now are predominantly UK schools. It's just beginning to take off, but for the first 2 years, There was very little interest at all, but it's now beginning to pick up. The other absolute key thing is to put something on your own website. So when people sign up for this, I usually, on the page where they sign up, I recommend, and I now strongly recommend to people that they set up a page on their website where they tell schools what they'll do on a Skype visit, and they tell schools what they need. Because quite often when you click on these links, and again recently, I think, is that Nikki in the corner of the room? Yeah. You know that I can't say to people how to get on Skype and tell me, if you've had much of an uptake. A few authors got back to me and they said, I've had no interest whatsoever. And when I've clicked on their link, no name mentioned, I've gone to their website. There's nothing on the website about the fact that they Skype. And it's a bit like when you want to go to a business and you go through the front door and there's nobody at reception. And you think, well, I'm leaving, I'm not going to go and find out. It's not signposted clearly. So if you're going to do it, set up a page on your website. And I do say on my website, feel free to copy and paste stuff from my page. So this is my page on my website. And on that, I tell schools what I offer. So I say, typically I do the reading, and then I do the Q&A. And it's about 20 minutes. And I steer them towards the books that are in print, the books I particularly want to promote at that time. If a school has got a particular old favourite and it's not in print, I usually say yes. I try and steer them to books that they'll hopefully buy a few copies of. First of all, I require them to have a copy of the book that I'm reading, but hopefully might encourage them to buy a few other copies. The other thing that I have on my page is a bookings table, so they don't ask me for dates that aren't available. I only Skype once a week. Once I've done that weekly slot, I don't offer it to anybody else. I only do it on Wednesdays. I only do it for certain times. If I've got other commitments, then I show it as unavailable. So I've got a massive unavailable slot here due to other commitments. But they can see very quickly when they're available. If you've got a blog and you can't throw up a table using them, if you can just have a list of dates and whatever you're available next to them. And then I have a form, and this, I think, if you can set up a form, is really useful because it gets all the information that you need without the bother of going backwards and forwards with emails. Particularly useful if you're starting for free because you don't want to spend time with admin and correspondence. So one of the things that I ask on here is right at the top is that thing about name, including title, and I explain that I need a title, so I want to call it for the kids. There's a link here. This, at the moment, says Skype name or email address you use to sign in to Skype with a Microsoft account. I stopped doing that now because of this problem with people having multiple accounts and the one email address. So I'm going to change that. But what I do have is a little link for people who don't know what their Skype name is. So we go to the Skype site and it shows them how to find that out quickly because that is quite often a problem. And then there's a few other things like international time converter. So if it's a US school, they have to tell me the time in England that they want to Skype with me. I'm not going to worry about that for and this is from a site called JotForm that allows you to set up forms for free. And as long as you don't have more than 100 submissions a month, they don't charge you anything. So for me, it's completely free. So have a look at that and you can find it, click on the JotForm link and set up your own form using that. The other thing that I have I tell them what they need, and I'd say if you're going to be doing it on the setup the first time, make sure that you tested the setup so that it works. Things like don't have a light switched on right next to the screen because it won't help kids see the screen. How to prepare is basically the same as a school visit. Make sure the kids know who they're going to be talking to, that they've read some of my books, have some questions prepared in advance, that sort of thing. And then at the end, and to some degree further up, if you've got some favourable feedback from other schools, that's the other thing that I put on that page so they can see what other schools have thought of my Skype sessions. On the website itself, on the book pages, those books that I do Skype with, I flag it up on the page. If you go to the Virtual Authors site, you can just download these graphics for free to use on your own site to sort of flag up which books you might. There's no sort of Virtual Authors branding on them, but feel free to use them. And then the last three things that I do is make sure your publishers know if you're offering Skype visits, so they can mention it to other people. If they say, just say do school visits, and they're quite often, well, it doesn't do school visits, but it will do a Skype visit. So make sure your publishers are marketing parts of it. I also tell my American publishers now routinely. It's a really good way of me making contact with them. And they kind of they realise that if there's a UK author, you're not that likely to go and tour and promote in the States in the way that you might be if you were a US author. So I let them know as well. And school library services, quite a few of them are quite keen to do this. In particular, Pauline Fresh at Leeds School Library Service has been telling schools, we've been promoting the virtual author site, been saying to schools, if you want to organise a Skype visit, we will supply you with books in advance by that author, so you can familiarise yourself. So she's quite proactive about it. But certainly, let other school library services know about it. And the very last thing, in terms of promoting yourself, is if you do get good feedback on Twitter or on social media, share it with other schools, because it gets, when schools see other schools doing it and they see that they've had a positive experience from it, then they're more likely to do it themselves. That's the end of my session. I'm going to run my 12 minutes. I've got so much material to get down to that.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. That was great. I mean, I think everyone's obviously got a lot out of that, and got a very, very comprehensive overview. And I think those of us who are complete Skype novices, it's been very inspirational. We've got time for some questions. Maybe I'll just kick off with one first of all. If people have got questions, they can join in. Do you find that some schools will approach you with something you can't do on Skype? Do you get requests for interactive workshops and so that you can say, well, I can't really do that?
This is one of the reasons, because I know Nicholas, we've exchanged conversations with about doing stuff for free.
Yeah.
Because I only do 20 minutes for free, one of my requirements is that I don't have to do preparation.
Yeah.
So I don't have the handle, because I just say, sometimes schools will say to me, we'd like you to read this book, and then we're doing, often with older kids, we're doing creative writing, we'd like you to talk to them 10 minutes about the creative writing process. And I would say, if you want to ask some questions about the creative writing process, I will answer them in the Q&A. But, so that's the way that I work. Is if I'm doing it for free, they have to do it on my terms. But I'm flexible. So quite often they want to present something to me. When I started on virtual authors saying I'm going to, this authors that do it for a fee, and of which there are a few already in the UK that will do Skype sessions for free that are listed on virtual authors now. Actually, I did think, well, do I want to start doing to what I do when I'm in schools? And actually, I thought, I don't think it's going to be anything like as good as when I'm doing it, in school. And once I start charging for it, I kind of, so that's my rationale for doing it the way that I do. But because I have that limit of saying you do it on my terms, I really don't find myself kind of going out of my comfort zone at the moment. Yeah.
Questions from the audience, please.
Do you do money paid sessions?
I don't do any paid. I mean, every single school visit I do, apart from my local school, I charge any festival sessions. So I'm absolutely on the same page as Nicholas. I do any festival sessions without charging for this.
So it's not the added value.
But the thing with this with me that made it difficult was that I started doing it in the States, and when I looked at Skyping in the States, there is this two-tier system. If you look at the sites that I pointed to earlier, the Skyping Author Network, they call them taster sessions, 15, 20-minute sessions for free, and then longer sessions for a fee. And so I started doing it in the States, and I really couldn't get English schools engaged at that point. But at the point where I started, making more of an effort to get English schools engaged, I thought I'm just not comfortable asking English schools to pay me to do something that I'm offering in the States for free, because that's the norm in the States. I've got to do, if I charge for 20 minutes a fee in the States, I don't think I've got any engagement. So that's the way that I do. I do think I don't do any preparation apart from probably 20 minutes admin, and then 20 minutes in the session. It's free, but I don't do any preparation other than that. I enjoy doing it, and there's definitely times, I can see it with the schools that I now Skype on year on year. I mentioned the book 1 year, that's the book they want me to Skype next year, and they've clearly been reading it, and sometimes you can see a stack of them. I did a session the other week, and I could, in the library, and I could see the library shelf that was just full of my books, So to me it is added value, and I have found that usually UK publishers these days say that the reason they're not taking it is they think it won't sell to the American market. had really interesting experience. I'm not sure I should say this on the live stream. I'll not make it anonymous. I had a book that I like working with illustrators from the first day. I like collaborative stuff. It's often the picture. Are you a picture book author?
No.
I'm a picture book author, and quite often publishers try to keep the author and the illustrator far, and they never meet. And so there's a few illustrators that I've got together because neither of us like that, and I don't mind them telling me what I should write, and they don't mind me inputting into what they should illustrate. So we get together very early, and we got a book published, and that we were very happy with by a UK publisher. Did a brilliant job on it. But the UK publisher didn't want to sell it, and it's partly because of lack of co-edition sales. And then it got sold in the States, and it really did well in the States, and started to do well rather. And so the illustrator and I thought, well, why don't we offer this second book that we wanted to do sorry, I should have said the UK publisher didn't want the follow-up because the first book wasn't doing that well. Why don't we offer it directly to the American publisher? And but we, out of courtesy, we went back to the UK publisher first and said, we think the American publishers might like it. And when we went back to the UK publisher, they said, and I have a word with the American publisher, and they decided to take it. Now, I think that's because I've built up an American readership, and Skype has allowed me to do that. So for me, there's this kind of circuitous route of saying by Skyping for free, which is the norm in America, I've kind of got another market that I wouldn't be able to reach on me, and that's helping to keep my overall business going in the UK as well. It's a very long-winded answer, so
Good comment.
yeah. Yes, Diane.
I had an experience when one book was was shortlisted in 2 different states, and it was a case of the children actually chose the final winner, and I was the only UK book there, so there were 9 books out against me, and I was very aware because some of the comments were, she doesn't have enough workshops offered on her website. Well, I didn't have every single workshop I've ever done on my website, and I think had I had Skype, I had done a Skype call once before, but had I used Skype, I think I might have won it, of course, but I think I would have got far, far more exposure.
Yes, and here's the funny thing, since I've been Skyping, and I can't remember the figures, but I quoted in a Facebook conversation, I think we were both in, since I've been Skyping, I've won far, I've not won, I would love to think I wouldn't. I've been nominated for far more US awards than I have UK awards. So it is a really effective way, which you were saying you managed to get that far without Skype. But if you use it, it's a really effective way of capitalising on
and this
leadership.
lovely interaction. And I just want to say thank you, Jonathan. I thought this was one of the most wonderful sessions I've ever been to.
Thank you.
Because you were so practical, and there was so much there to take in. So even people that don't normally Skype, I think you made it sound.
Well, I would really love to see more people Skyping in the UK because it's hugely successful over there. And I do think that it's a way. Actually, how many people do a patron of reading? Actually, that's why I don't know what the patron of reading scheme is.
Patron of reading.
Okay, so the patron of reading scheme is a scheme where an author pairs up with a school to promote reading for pleasure, and you work with them for 3 years. And you're not promoting your own work; you're just promoting reading for pleasure. And I think that the key to it is reading for pleasure is diversity of choice. And I know that when I go into schools, although initially you end up talking about. Initially start by talking about your own books. There's going to be kids in that school that don't like my own books. And one of the things I would like to see is a kind of reciprocal arrangement among patrons of reading, so that, if I want to focus on non-fiction, I don't write that much non-fiction, I could have 20 minutes Skype with another patron who writes non-fiction, or an illustrator. And I already do this a bit. I've done it with illustrators when I've done schemes with my patron of reading school. FaceTime with the illustrator, but I just think it's a really great way to get that direct engagement without, and look at some schools, without going to the whole school visit thing. And even if it's just 20 minutes or half an hour or an hour for a paid visit, I think it can have much the same effect as an in-person visit. You can just go to really far-flung places. There's still some practical problems. I've never Skyped with a school in Wales. I've had schools in Wales book a visit, And then they find out that their local network, the local authority, won't let them use Skype. I've then Skyped with a school in Scotland. So all of my UK visits have been, and in Northern Ireland either, have been in England because of stupid technical restrictions that stop the school, from making the most of the hardware and the broadband connections that they've got already. But it is slowly, going to the way that things are in the States.
Second what Diane said, it was a fantastic, fantastic session.
Thank
Thank you very much. My question may be easily dismissed with there is no solution to that, but I have really bad broadband. I live in a rural village.
Yeah.
How good does it have to be? And because this is actually the only thing that's put me off doing it and doing webinars as well.
I've cut loads of material on there, but that was one of the things I was going to address, and I decided it was too nerdy. But let me see if I can get that.
I have a reasonable speed most of the day, but it's flaky. And
I was going to talk a little bit. Actually, I don't need to page it. I remember what I was going to talk about. So this is the thing, because for a lot of people it has been a little
if
bit.
This isn't a problem for anyone else.
No. It was because I wanted to just talk about picture quality and sound quality generally. Okay. So the only way, yes, if you've got really poor local broadband, the fact that even broadband suggests it's not going to be that out of question. According to Skype,
it's just fibre optic, but it's just really
okay. So what I was going to try and get up, let me see if I can get it on the screen. Why is that? Oh, it's only on there. Okay. Okay, that's what I'm doing. So it's the offcuts I wanted to show you. Okay, and so I was going to talk a little bit about the fact, this is kind of an average picture quality, but this is what Skype say that they need for decent picture quality. So even high definition is 1.5 megabytes per second. Now, at the moment, if you've got broadband, it's almost certainly going to be in excess of that. I'm on the standard, Nottingham is very good, well served for broadband. I'm on the standard Virgin package, and I checked it earlier in the week, and I get 80 megabytes per second. So I'm this is well within the scope of it, but once you start adding in other people. But what I was going to say was sometimes you will Skype with the school, and you'll get this blocky Lego picture, and slightly broken sound, and you're thinking, if that's what they're seeing with me at there, and this is going to be a terrible experience for them. The point that I was going to make on this page is, I get lots of pictures in schools of my Skype sessions, and I always look nice and sharp, and I've kind of stopped asking now, can you see me clearly, can you hear me clearly? What I see, the quality of what I see, does not necessarily reflect the quality of what they see. And one of the problems is the download speed, getting very technical now, isn't necessarily the same as the upload speed. Sometimes there's a difference of 10, so that the signal that you're sending out may be a tenth of the strength of the signal that you're sending in. And the school, quite often they're sharing their broadband with somebody else. So you're getting a terrible signal from them, but they're getting a crystal clear signal from you. So the chief thing you should be asking yourself is, how well am I coming across? The only reliable way, I would say, of ascertaining that is to Skype with somebody around the time of day, because patterns of music.
I was going to ask you that, because I know that in the evening, because I live in the village, and that once the kids are going to school.
If you're doing it in the daytime, Skype somebody or if you've got, as I was hoping to do earlier, that was the one that's actually crashed. If you've got two devices at home that you can Skype on, and set up separate accounts, as I was suggesting. If you Skype yourself, it will go via your broadband connection and back, and you'll be able to assess the picture quality. If you ask it to Skype with a friend, then they can perhaps even record on a camera or something like that, on a phone camera, for you to see it. That's really the only really reliable way. But it's just to flag up this thing that if you're getting a terrible picture quality at your end, it doesn't mean that they're getting a terrible picture quality at your end.
Robbie, have we got any questions from the virtual attendees?
No.
That's why they're always joining.
After that thing like up to the camera, is that the camera?
Yes.
So I saw on your website you had older key stages there for the teenagers. Do you know how much uptake there is to secondary schools for YA authors?
I don't know. I mean, I've heard back from, I know that one of the people that signed up quite early is it Kerry Drury? Yeah.
And she did one probably a couple of years ago that she got some great feedback from, but I don't know how many sessions she's done, since then. I don't I don't follow up that often as Nikki will know. I send an email out basically if I have done an update on the site, but I've not. I don't think I've heard anybody say, I just Skype all the while. It's still quite slow in this country. But to me, I just think it's something that can only grow.
Yes.
Because it's schools have already got the equipment. They've already got broadband connections. It seems silly not to use it.
Any more questions? Yes.
Yeah, just quite very basic, but in terms of offering the free visits, does that tend to be reading from a book and answering questions they give you? Is that
That's what I
about
do.
20 minutes?
That's, yeah.
And then in terms of doing something longer, I know that isn't something that you offer, but have you heard or do you know of other longer events that work well with Skype? Because
I get the impression from reading through most American authors and looking at their pages is that they do pretty much what they would do if they were in schools generally. So they do the same presentation. And they might use Keynote. So it's, I like, for instance, if I was thinking if I was going to offer a paid session, they do this thing called How a Picture Book is Made. That is an hour-long session for Key Stage 2 children. Most of my books are aimed at Key Stage 1 children. That's the sort of thing that I would do. It's just that I feel that for that, I want to kind of be in the room because it's a long session. And actually, I do feel being in the room allows me to engage in a way that, that even all the things we're saying about, the playing with the screen, I just feel that it works better in person.
And to have energy as well. I think it might be quite hard to keep energy going for longer than 20 minutes. If I'm just sitting at my screen rather than standing doing stuff.
There was one kind of cultural thing that I was going to at the beginning of this session, actually, that I just kind of, mention now that why I think it does work. Because I've done some sessions with younger kids, and there's been a kid at the back of the class that has just gone, "This is so cool." And I've read it's happened twice, the American kids, and what they mean, I realise, is they don't mean talking to Jonathan Emmett. Actually, I would love them to my dreams come true. It's talking to somebody on a big screen and have them talking back. And there are a generation of kids that have grown up looking at screens, and lots of them would prefer, looking at a screen to looking at a book. And so, to actually have a screen that engages with them, that suddenly makes it much more appealing. And it's a great way to, okay, that's what they want to do. Look at the screen rather than looking at get on screen and then tell them about the books, sort of do it that way. And the other thing I was going to put up in amongst this, on my offcuts, I can't cope with this thing coming off the screen. Yeah, where is it? Okay. There's this one. I was going to ask you how many of you knew who these people were. Just so you get to show your age. How many you can name? Yeah, some names are That's impressive, Nicola. I don't think I only name 3 of them. Okay, so they're all YouTubers.
Yeah.
And these are all people who our kids are, obsessed with. My daughter, she didn't know this, but she knew the other 3. That's PewDiePie. And not only are the YouTubers and kids are obsessed with different screens, but the other thing they've all got in common from this perspective is they're all promoting books, and they're not shy about going on our turf, And I think we shouldn't be shy about going on theirs. And if you're using Skype, you've got the added advantage of dialogue, which is what they can't offer on YouTube because they've got such a massive audience. It's just, but and I would say, when you're looking at how to present yourself on Skype, it's one of the things that I did. John Green, the guy who wrote Fault in Our Stars, him and his brother call themselves the Blog Brothers.
Nerd fighters or whatever.
I think they're called the Blog Brothers or something like that. Well, they might have very small. They're brilliant at doing videos, and actually they do a lot of things like quick cuts. But actually, just look at the way that they present themselves on screen. Look at the backdrops that John Green has behind him. So he has these, shelves full of these amazing, colourful toys. Look at the way that he's lit. You can do all of that. I don't set up a lighting studio every time I Skype every week. But I have this setup now that is there all week, and I just sit down and turn this light on the side, and I know that it helps if I drop the blinds and turn the light on. And, you know, you can present yourself in a way that, you know, can look visually impressive. I know that sounds astonishing looking at me, but it is possible. Yeah.
Can you use green screen with Skype?
No, and I so wanted to do that. So like the thing the app I showed you earlier, which was very dim on screen, so that photo booth, you can use green screen on that. You know, you can be on a roller coaster. So I think it's only a matter of time between us. I use green screen for my videos, so I book trailers for a while. And yeah, I thought exactly the same thing. And the other thing I thought about doing, because I thought, oh, I really want to have a background of one of my books behind it. The other thing I thought about doing is a possible thing similar to that is because this camera has quite good depth of field, so I was showing you with the clockwork toy earlier. I thought I might make like what was almost like a little pair of spectacle frames that hangs over the top of that, and actually is a little like a frame of characters from my books, you know, coming in the side of the screen, because the camera is good enough to have that in focus and have me in focus. And I thought about making it for this, and I thought, you know what, I spent so much time on this question, I'm going to draw the line there. So yeah, no, I'm sure green screens are coming, but it's not there at the moment. And I'm sure the other thing that frustrates me about doing the presentations, which I wasn't able to show you, about doing a PowerPoint presentation, is that the presentation fills the whole screen, but if I manage to get it to come up, you're seeing that the little picture showing me talking is relatively small. And you know, when I'm doing a reading of a book, I don't use that presentation method. I just have my face on screen, because then I get a teacher in the school to show the pages of the book. That's why they have to have a copy of the book. Because I wish I could be, if you're doing a presentation, they could see more of you, because otherwise it's almost too much like watching a video. You know, there needs to be that sense of engagement and interaction, rapport, that's the word. And you know, when Skype visits work well, it's because you've established a rapport. Because in exactly the same way you've established a rapport because a live visit.
Do you find that publicity and setting up technically of it all eats into a lot of your writing time, or have you got to the point now where it's second nature to you, and initially it took a lot of time?
Initially it took a lot of time, and it's something I wanted to devote to. I mean, basically it came out of me because my family and I keep a carbon budget, and a few years ago I said I wasn't going to do any real schooling. In fact, the school is outside the East Midlands area, and I thought I've got to make sure I can engage with schools further afield than that. So I invested quite a lot of time initially. And I was really worried about the first visit. You know, it was on my mind all day. But now I do this 20 minutes a week of admin, and literally 20 minutes a week of Skyping. And I only do in term time. Right. So it's like 30 weeks a year, or whatever it is.
So you know exactly how much time you have to devote to it.
Yeah, because so at the end of each Skype session, I will check to see. I look at the visits I've got coming up, check to see that if the contact requests have been answered. I might, these days I rarely do, I might send another reminder saying you've got a first contact request. And because I have that booking table, I only have as many requests as I have slots. So I'm not turning people down all the while. So you know, that page I showed you on the website, where you get all the information in advance, that was aimed at just getting the admin edge 20 minutes free, and I didn't spend a lot of time on it. But it doesn't. I only go on Wednesdays.
Right.
And that's the day. I don't let it go, because that's the day it's on Stormy can then wait for a weekend. And if I'm doing, if I like your book day week, I'm doing that week, you know, on Wednesday. I don't know that I think I might have some other commitment in this one. So, no, it doesn't. It's literally not a phone call for me. And my big worry is forget that I have a Skype visit for it. So I have a little notification thing comes on each 15 minutes in advance. I've never done it, but I nearly did it. And then this thing comes at 15 minutes, and I'm like, okay, I need to take the phone off. I usually do that 15 minutes in advance. But if I'm working on something, I will carry on working. And this week, you know, I was working up to 5 minutes before the visit, and then I just go kids, and you know, this is the thing about, I know this thing about not doing it. But one of the things that I had said is that earlier this month I got a big envelope of letters from a school in Canada about one of my books, and in that envelope there were 5 letters that And I, as an author, I kind of feel, you know, if a class is all going to work on my book for a while, I feel obliged. And I'm dyslexic. I actually find writing quite difficult. So it's quite often I will spend more than 20 minutes. I'll write an email back to them and I'll say, in answer to your question, I have usual questions. And it will kind of take me longer to do that, do in Skype visit. And I actually think that the kids get more out of the Skype visit than did, but they get much more engagement, they're much more likely to remember me, and much more look at the books. And also it's part of, you know, because you have got the gift of 1,000 words, so, you know, if they ask you a question, you have to put it back in language that a 7-year-old understand or whatever. You can't kind of say, oh, I've got this fantastic book, and you can't be quite so fluent. So that's one of the reasons why I do think it's time. For me, it's time investment.
Yes.
And I enjoy it. That's the reason why I had to do it.
Do you charge, what kind of fee they charge as a percentage of their normal fees, say?
I
Or do you
get
know that?
asked about all the time. And somebody asked me that in the last couple of weeks. I can't remember who it was. And I don't actually do anything. I say, have a look at the sites. There's now a few people listed on virtual authors. I did look at one, there's an astronomer guy. I think he's got his fees on his site. The other thing is go and have a look at the American site where there are lots of authors with fees. You know, roughly equivalent is. But I don't, off the top of my head, I can't remember what those figures are.
I asked a couple of friends, and some do it for free, and a couple do charge, and one girlfriend said to charge me 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
20, 30 minutes, that's it.
Yeah.
Any more questions, Jonathan, from the floor?
What about canceling?
Yeah.
Cancelling for me, or cancelling
Yeah, I
for
mean,
them?
like, you know, Skype session, did you ever have a?
I've had once I had to cancel with the school, and actually this is why I do it for free. It says I reserve the right to cancel and offer you arrange a visit. There was one school, occasionally you get an email from the school and you write back, you don't hear back from them. But when my son did, I'll send you this and there was one school that I think my was just going to the spam folder. A couple of weeks before the visit, I had an important meeting with the publisher, so I wrote to them and said, I can't do this anymore, I had to do it another day that week, not necessarily Wednesday. And I didn't hear anything back from them. And then on the day, I think they got an email saying, you're still going ahead today. And I emailed them back, I said, no, I'm afraid we're not going ahead. I emailed you too. I'm afraid I'm literally going outside of the door now. And, you know, I've got to go to this other session. And I got back and there was an email about how I disappointed all these kids.
Oh.
And I tried tweeting the school, tweeting and said, please can you tell me so and so, you know, that I to look in their spam folder because I have been emailing her to tell her I had to cancel them. You know, which made me feel awful. But I've only had to do it once, which surprises me, to be honest. But yes, because I do free visits, I do have to, I do reserve the right to cancel. But I am, somebody at school I went to last year, World Book Day, told me that they had booked a very big name of illustrator, but well respected, you probably heard of him, I'm not going to mention him, a year in advance for World Book Day the previous year, and he came 2 months, I think it was, beforehand, because he had an offer to go to overseas. You know, and so, you know, people all this cancelled all the while. It shouldn't be anything on Skype.
Any more questions? A lot of questions, which has been great.
Sorry, can you take the still photos in the Skype app, or do you need a separate one, like you mentioned, photo-based recording?
Still photos of what?
Well, you know, you said you wanted a picture of
A screenshot.
the craft to show up.
I just, I'd imagine it's the same on this machine. On a Mac, you can take a screenshot of whatever's on the screen. So it's just it's a keyboard. I think it's something like Command Alt 4 or 3. Yeah. So you can just take a screenshot of it, and I cropped it down to the bit that was just the kids on it. But there are some things, like things I was showing you on the sort of cut down version of the PowerPoint that for some reason it won't let you take a screenshot of. And when you try and take a screenshot, that bit is missing. So I have to literally take a photograph of the screen. But yeah, I just think it's a screenshot of the Skype screen and let you do that.
Not on a PC, you can do alt print screen, is that right?
I don't know, but I'm sure there isn't a equivalent, yeah.
Any more questions? Right, well, thank you very much, Jonathan. It's been a fascinating evening, and I think it's given lots of us some ideas to go away and think about, and being used, certainly to me, and I'm sure to lots of you as well. So, on behalf of Sydney and Society of August, thank you very much, Jonathan. We still have prints and nibbles available at the back